The doorbell rang at exactly 8:30 on my 42nd birthday morning, just as I was pouring orange juice for Emma and Dylan. I wasn't expecting anyone. The UPS guy usually came later, and our neighbors in Westfield knew better than to drop by during the morning school rush. Emma looked up from her cereal bowl, her 17-year-old face already skeptical. That's my daughter. Always reading the room before I even notice there's something to read. Dylan. My 14-year-old kept shoveling Lucky Charms into his mouth like the world might end before he finished the bowl. I opened the front door to find a delivery driver holding an elegant box wrapped in silver paper with a cream-colored ribbon. The kind of presentation that screams expensive, no return address on the label, just my name written in careful block letters. "Thank you," I told the driver, signing for the package with growing curiosity. Back in the kitchen, Emma was already gathering her backpack for school. "Who sends gifts this early in the morning?" she asked, eyeing the box with the same wariness she'd inherited from me. Her dark hair fell across her face as she leaned closer to examine the package. "I have no idea, sweetie." The wrapping paper came away easily, revealing a plain white box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a bottle of Beluga Noble vodka. The label gleamed gold and black, the kind of premium liquor that costs more than my grocery budget for a week. A small white envelope was tucked alongside the bottle. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope and read the card inside. The handwriting was unmistakable, even after 2 years of silence. "Happy 42nd, Elena. Time to celebrate like old times. Love, Sarah." My sister, my younger sister, who hadn't spoken to me since our parents' funeral in 2019, when everything fell apart over the inheritance. The sister who blamed me for getting the family house in Summit while she received the cash settlement that she claimed wasn't fair. Dylan looked up from his cereal. "Is that from Aunt Sarah?" "Yes, honey. It's a birthday gift." Emma's expression darkened. She knows all about Aunt Sarah from the fragments she's picked up over the years. The arguments, the silence, the way Sarah's name makes me tense up even now. "She's still posting weird stuff on Instagram," Emma said, not looking at me directly. "Like passive-aggressive stuff about family and fairness." I set the bottle on the counter, my mind racing. Sarah knew I couldn't drink alcohol. My anxiety medication interacted badly with liquor, something she'd learned during one of our last conversations before everything went wrong. "So why send vodka? Maybe she forgot about your medication," Dylan offered. Always the optimist in our family. "Maybe she just wants to make up." "Maybe," I said, though something cold was settling in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and quickly scrolled to Sarah's Instagram account. Her latest post from 3 days ago showed a perfectly staged flat lay of coffee, flowers, and a journal. The caption read, "Family is everything. Sometimes people need reminders of what really matters." The comments were full of fire emojis and hard-eye faces from her 12,000 followers. Sarah had built a decent following as a lifestyle influencer, though I knew from our mother's worried phone calls before she died that Sarah struggled financially despite her online success. I screenshotted the post without really thinking about why. Emma was watching me scroll through Sarah's feed. She posts like her life is perfect, but there's something off about it lately, like angry underneath. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, just a feeling." The way she talks about deserving things, getting what's owed to you, stuff like that. I closed the phone and looked at the bottle again. $400 worth of premium vodka that I couldn't drink. The gesture felt loaded somehow, like there was a message I wasn't getting. "Are you going to call her?" Dylan asked. "I don't know yet." The kids finished breakfast and gathered their school things. Emma kissed my cheek on her way out, and Dylan gave me his usual quick hug. After they left, the house felt too quiet, and the bottle seemed to take up more space on the counter than it should have. I picked up my phone and typed out a text to Sarah. "Thank you for the beautiful birthday gift. It was very thoughtful." The response came back within minutes. "Hope you enjoy it properly." Something about those 3 words made my chest tighten. Enjoy it properly. What did that mean? Was there a wrong way to enjoy a gift? I wrapped the bottle back in its tissue paper and placed it in the pantry. Whatever Sarah's intentions were, I wasn't ready to figure them out at 8:45 on a Tuesday morning. I had work to get to, and a birthday to get through. But as I grabbed my keys and headed for the garage, I couldn't shake the feeling that this gift was less about celebration and more about something else entirely. The drive to TechFlow Solutions gave me 25 minutes to think, which turned out to be 25 minutes too many. My mind kept circling back to that bottle and Sarah's cryptic response. Our family had never been simple, but it used to be loving. Sarah and I grew up sharing a bedroom in the Summit House, whispering secrets after our parents thought we were asleep. She was the creative one, always drawing or writing stories or coming up with elaborate games for us to play in the backyard. I was the responsible one, the one who remembered homework and chores and made sure Sarah got to school on time. When our parents died in that car accident 3 years ago, everything changed. Not just because we lost them, but because of what they left behind. The house, the modest savings, the life insurance, it all had to be divided between us. And somehow what should have been a straightforward process became a battlefield. I'd inherited the house where we grew up, the 3-bedroom colonial with the big oak tree in the front yard, and the kitchen where our mother had taught us both to cook. Sarah received the cash equivalent, $185,000 after taxes and fees. It should have been fair. It should have been enough. But Sarah felt cheated. She claimed I'd influenced our parents, convinced them that I deserved more because I was the stable one with kids to raise. She insisted that our parents had always favored me, and the inheritance proved it. The truth was messier than that. Our parents had worried about Sarah's financial instability, her pattern of jumping from relationship to relationship, job to job. They'd set up the inheritance to give her liquid assets she could use however she needed. While giving me the family home that my kids already considered theirs, Sarah saw it as proof of favoritism. I saw it as our parents trying to take care of both of us in different ways. The arguments started at the funeral reception and continued for months. Lawyers got involved. Accusations flew. Sarah claimed I'd manipulated our grieving parents. I accused her of being selfish and ungrateful. Things were said that couldn't be taken back. The final break came at Christmas 2019. Sarah showed up to my house uninvited with her new boyfriend, Marcus Chebb, a software engineer she'd met online. He seemed nice enough, quiet and thoughtful. The kind of man who might actually be good for my volatile sister. But Sarah spent the entire evening making cutting remarks about my house, my life, how lucky I was to have everything handed to me. When I finally asked her to leave, she exploded, told me I was a manipulative bitch who'd stolen her inheritance and her childhood, said our parents would be ashamed of what I'd become. Marcus tried to calm her down, but she was past listening to anyone. That was the last time we'd spoken directly until today's text exchange. I pulled into the TechFlow parking lot and sat for a moment before heading inside. The bottle was still bothering me, nagging at my thoughts like a splinter I couldn't reach. At my desk, I tried to focus on the quarterly marketing reports that needed my attention, but my mind kept drifting. Around 10:30, I found myself pulling up Sarah's Instagram again. Scrolling back through several weeks of posts, her feed was the usual lifestyle influencer content. Perfectly arranged breakfast bowls, motivational quotes over sunset photos, flat lays of books and coffee cups that probably took an hour to stage. But Emma was right about something feeling off. There was an edge to the recent captions that I'd missed before, posts about people getting what they deserved, about karma being a patient teacher, about the universe eventually balancing the scales. One post from 2 weeks ago showed a photo of her hands holding a mug of tea, with the caption, "Some people think they can take everything and never pay the price, but the universe keeps score, and payment always comes due." 47 likes, 12 comments with various combinations of fire and applause emojis. Her followers seemed to eat up this kind of vaguely motivational content without reading between the lines. But I was reading between the lines now, and I didn't like what I was seeing. Samantha Brooks, my boss and the vice president of our marketing division, appeared at my cubicle with her usual coffee cup and concerned expression. She'd been my supervisor for 3 years and had become something of a mentor, the kind of woman who noticed when her employees were struggling. "You seem distracted today," she said. "Is everything okay?" "It's nothing work-related, just some family stuff." Samantha was in her late 40s with 2 teenagers of her own, and she'd been through her own share of family drama. She also had a way of seeing through workplace politeness to the real issue underneath. "Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling her about the vodka, about Sarah, about the years of silence and the strange feeling that this gift carried some kind of message I wasn't understanding. Samantha listened without interrupting, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you think she knows you can't drink alcohol?" "Yes." "She definitely knows. Then why send vodka?" I'd been asking myself the same question all morning. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she wants me to give it to someone else. Maybe it's just a peace offering that she didn't think through very carefully. But even as I said the word, I didn't believe them. Sarah had always been impulsive, but she wasn't thoughtless. Every gift she'd ever given me had been carefully chosen, meaningful in some way, This felt meaningful too, but in a way that made my stomach clench. Have you responded to her yet? Samantha asked. I sent a thank you text. She said she hoped I'd enjoy it properly. Samantha raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting choice of words. That's what I thought too. Maybe you should just call her, clear the air directly instead of trying to decode Instagram posts and text messages. The idea of calling Sarah made my chest tighten. 2 years of silence had built a wall between us that felt too high to climb over with a simple phone call. And there was something about that bottle, something about her response, that made me want to be very careful about my next move. I'll think about it, I told Samantha. But as I turned back to my computer screen, I realized I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to call Sarah, not yet. First, I wanted to understand what she was really trying to tell me, and I had a growing suspicion that I wasn't going to like the answer. Saturday afternoon found me in the backyard, pulling weeds from the flower bed that had gotten completely out of control over the summer. The kids were both at friends' houses, and I was enjoying the rare quiet when I heard the gate latch click open. I turned to see Marcus Chen walking across my lawn. Carrying a toolbox in one hand and looking somewhat hesitant, it had been 8 months since I'd last seen him. Not since that disastrous Christmas dinner when Sarah had her meltdown in my living room. Elena, he called out, raising his free hand in a cautious wave. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I was in the neighborhood. Marcus, I said, getting to my feet and brushing dirt off my jeans. Of course it's okay. How are you? He was a tall, quiet man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the type who thought before he spoke and never seemed to raise his voice. I'd always liked him, even during that awful Christmas evening. He'd tried his best to calm Sarah down, and when that failed, he'd apologized to me privately before they left. I'm doing well, he said. Listen, I noticed your back fence has some loose boards when I drove past last week. I brought some tool. Thought I might fix it for you if that's all right. I blinked in surprise. You don't have to do that. I know. But I'd like to, if you'll let me. There was something in his voice that made me study his face more carefully. He looked tired, maybe a little stressed. Does Sarah know you're here? He shook his head, and there it was. The real reason for his visit, she doesn't know. And I'd prefer to keep it that way for now. Things have been difficult lately. Elena, she's been upset about a lot of things, and your name comes up more often than I'd like. We walked toward the back fence together, and I could see he was right about the loose boards. 3 of them were pulling away from the frame. Probably from the heavy rains we'd had in July. What kind of things is she saying? Marcus set down his toolbox and pulled out a hammer and some nails. He was quiet for a long moment, testing the loose boards with his hands. She tracks your social media constantly, your Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. She knows when you get promoted, when you take the kids somewhere fun, when you post pictures of the house or your car. And it makes her angry. My stomach tightened. I barely post anything personal online, maybe a few photos of the kids at baseball games or school events. Nothing that should be causing problems. It's not what you post, Marcus said, starting to work on the first loose board. It's what your posts represent to her. The life you have, the stability, the house, the job, the kids who seem happy and well-adjusted. She compares herself to you constantly, and she always comes up short in her own mind. I felt a familiar wave of frustration and guilt. I'd worked hard for the life I had. After my divorce 4 years ago, I'd fought to keep the house, to maintain some stability for Emma and Dylan. I'd taken on extra projects at work, budgeted carefully, made sacrifices to make it all work. Sarah's financial struggles weren't my fault, but she was still my sister. Is she okay? Marcus. I mean, really okay. He paused in his hammering and looked at me directly. I don't know. She started a blog last year, trying to monetize her Instagram following. It's not going well. We're behind on rent for her apartment in Brooklyn. And she's convinced that if she just gets more followers, more engagement, everything will work out. The blog was news to me. I'd noticed her posting more frequently, but I hadn't realized she was trying to turn it into a business. She talks about you a lot, Marcus continued, about how you got everything handed to you. The house, the stable job, even the kids. She says you always were the favorite. That stung. Partly because there was a grain of truth to it. Our parents had worried about Sarah's impulsiveness, her tendency to jump from job to job and relationship to relationship. They'd probably been more cautious about praising her choices than they should have been. I never asked to be the favorite, I said quietly. I know that, and deep down, I think Sarah knows it too. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are 2 different things. Marcus worked steadily while we talked, and I found myself helping by holding boards in place while he nailed them down. There was something therapeutic about the simple, physical work. Is that why you're here? To tell me about Sarah's state of mind. Partly, but also because I miss having you in our lives. You're good people, Elena. Your kids are great kids. When Sarah had that breakdown at Christmas, I felt like we lost something important. I'd missed Marcus too. I realized, in the chaos of my divorce and single parenting, he'd been a calm, stable presence during family gatherings, someone I could count on to keep conversation light when Sarah got too intense. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, and I found myself thinking about the vodka sitting in my pantry. The timing of Marcus's visit felt significant somehow, though I couldn't put my finger on why. When we finished with the fence, I brought out 2 glasses of iced tea, and we sat on my back deck in the late afternoon sunlight. Can I ask you something? Marcus, of course. Did Sarah say anything about sending me a birthday gift? He frowned. Not that I remember. When is your birthday? Tuesday. This past Tuesday. She sent me a bottle of vodka. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. She sent you vodka. But you can't drink alcohol with your medication. You remember that? Of course I remember. You mentioned it at Thanksgiving a few years ago when my mom was offering everyone wine, so Sarah would remember too. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him thinking through the implications of what I'd just told him. That's strange, he said finally. Why would she send you something she knows you can't use? I was hoping you might have some insight into that. He shook his head slowly. I honestly don't know, but Elena, if Sarah sent you vodka knowing you can't drink it, there might be a reason for that. A reason that has nothing to do with celebrating your birthday. His words sent a chill through me. Even in the warm afternoon air, I went inside and brought out the bottle. Still in its tissue paper wrapping, Marcus examined it carefully, turning it over in his hand. This is expensive stuff, he said. $400 at least. Sarah doesn't have that kind of money to throw around. Especially not lately, so where did she get it? I don't know. But Elena, I think you should keep this. Don't regift it or throw it away or anything like that. Just keep it somewhere safe. Why? Because something about this doesn't feel right to me. And if I'm wrong, then no harm done. But if I'm right, you might need it as evidence of something. Evidence of what? Marcus looked at me with serious eyes. I don't know yet. But Sarah's been different lately. Angrier. More obsessed with the idea that life has been unfair to her. And now this gift doesn't make sense. I took the bottle back from him and rewrapped it carefully in the tissue paper. My hands were trembling slightly. What should I do? For now, nothing. But Elena, be careful. And if anything else strange happens, anything at all, call me immediately. As Marcus packed up his tools and prepared to leave, I felt compelled to offer him something in return for his help and his honesty. Marcus, wait. I can't drink this vodka, and it seems like a shame to let it go to waste. Why don't you take it home? You and Sarah could enjoy it together. Maybe it would even help smooth things over between us. Marcus hesitated, looking at the wrapped bottle in my hand. Are you sure? I'm sure. Tell Sarah it's from me. A peace offering. Maybe it will help her understand that I don't want to be enemies. Marcus took the bottle, but his expression remained troubled. I'll surprise her with it, he said. Maybe it will help. As I watched him walk back to his car, I felt a mix of hope and unease. I'd given him the vodka as a gesture of goodwill, but something about his warnings had unsettled me. What if there was more to Sarah's gift than I'd realized? What if Marcus was right to be concerned? Sunday evening found me in the kitchen, making dinner and feeling more relaxed than I had in days. Emma was upstairs working on college applications, and Dylan was at the dining room table doing math homework that he insisted he could handle alone. The house felt peaceful in the way that only Sunday evenings could. With the promise of a new week ahead and the satisfaction of weekend tasks completed, I was browning ground beef for tacos when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Jessica Chen, and I felt a spike of curiosity. I'd met Jessica a few times at community events. She was Marcus's sister, a physical therapist who worked at the rehabilitation center downtown. And we developed a friendly acquaintance through our kids' school activities. Eleanor, Jessica said when I answered, and immediately I could tell something was wrong. Her voice was tight with panic. I'm at Overlook Medical Center. Marcus is here. He's in critical condition. The wooden spoon slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. What happened? He collapsed at home about an hour ago. Sarah called 911. The paramedics said his heart rate was dangerously low, and he was having some kind of neurological episode. They rushed him here, and the doctors are running tests. But Elena, they think he might have been poisoned. The word hit me like a physical blow. Poisoned. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway. Drawn by the tone of my voice, she took one look at my face and immediately turned off the stove burner without being asked. Which hospital? I managed to say. Overlook Medical Center. Emergency department. Elena. Can you come? I know you and Marcus are friends, and Sarah is completely falling apart. She could use some support. I'll be right there. I hung up and stood staring at the phone for a moment, my mind racing. Marcus. Poisoned. The word kept echoing in my head, and with it came a sick realization that I didn't want to acknowledge. The vodka? Mom, Emma said. What's wrong? That was Jessica Chen. Marcus is in the hospital. They think he might have been poisoned. Emma's face went pale. Oh my God. Is he going to be okay? I don't know. Sweetheart. I need to go to the hospital. Can you watch Dylan for me? Of course. I grabbed my purse and keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get my jacket on. The 15-minute drive to Overlook Medical Center passed in a blur of terrible possibilities. The emergency department was controlled chaos, all bright lights and urgent voices and that distinctive hospital smell of disinfectant and fear. I found Jessica in the waiting area, pacing back and forth with her phone pressed to her ear. She ended her call when she saw me and immediately pulled me into a hug. Thank God you came, she said. Sarah's been asking for family. But Marcus's parents are in San Francisco visiting his brother, and they won't be able to get here until tomorrow morning. Where is Sarah? She's with Marcus. They're letting her stay because she's his wife, but the doctors need to run more tests, and she's not handling it well. What kind of tests? Blood work. Mostly. The doctors say his symptoms are consistent with some kind of plant-based toxin. His heart rate dropped dangerously low, and he was having muscle spasms and difficulty breathing. If Sarah hadn't called 911 when she did, he might not have made it. Plant-based toxin. My stomach lurched as I remembered Marcus examining the vodka bottle yesterday afternoon, turning it over in his hands, asking why Sarah would send me something she knew I couldn't use. Can I see him? Let me check with the nurse. Jessica disappeared down a hallway, and I was left alone with my growing horror. If Marcus had been poisoned by plant toxin, and if the vodka I'd given him contained those toxins, then I had handed him the weapon that was killing him. But that would mean Sarah had intended for me to drink it. Sarah had intended to poison me. Jessica returned with a nurse who led me to a small room where machines beeped steadily and tubes snaked across a hospital bed. Marcus looked pale and fragile under the harsh fluorescent lights, nothing like the capable man who had fixed my fence yesterday afternoon. Sarah sat in a plastic chair beside the bed, holding Marcus's hand. She looked up when I entered, and I was shocked by her appearance. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her eyes were red with crying. "Elena," she said, and her voice broke. "Thank God you're here." I moved to the other side of the bed, fighting the urge to study Sarah's face for signs of deception. She looked genuinely devastated, genuinely terrified for her husband's life. How is he? The doctors don't know yet. They think he consumed something toxic, but they can't figure out what. We had dinner at home, the same food we always eat. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should have caused this. I felt like I was walking through a minefield where any wrong step could explode everything. Did he drink anything unusual tonight? Sarah's answer came too quickly. Without the pause I would have expected from someone trying to remember details, just wine with dinner, like always. But that was impossible. Marcus was allergic to sulfites, a fact he'd mentioned at least 3 times in my presence. He never drank wine. He couldn't drink wine without getting severe headaches and stomach problems. Sarah was lying. I studied her face as she continued talking about the evening, about how normal everything had been, about how suddenly Marcus had started feeling dizzy and then collapsed in their living room. She maintained perfect eye contact, showed all the right emotions, hit all the right notes of a terrified wife, but she was lying about the wine, which meant she was probably lying about other things too. Amanda Torres appeared in the doorway, a compact woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of calm competence that inspires confidence in a crisis. "Mrs. Chen," she said to Sarah, "I have some preliminary test results I'd like to discuss with you. Could we speak privately?" Sarah looked torn between leaving Marcus's side and getting the information she desperately needed. "I'll stay with him," I offered. "Take as long as you need." Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand and followed the doctor into the hallway. Through the partially open door, I could hear fragments of their conversation, words like alkaloids and plant toxins and cardiac depression. I moved closer to the bed and looked down at Marcus's unconscious face. Yesterday, he had been worried about Sarah's mental state, warning me to be careful. suggesting I keep the vodka as evidence. Now he was fighting for his life, possibly because of the vodka I had given him.
Marcus,
I whispered. I'm so sorry. His eyes remained closed. But the monitors continued their steady beeping, proof that he was still fighting. Sarah returned a few minutes later, and I could see from her expression that the news wasn't good. The doctor says they found plant alkaloids in his blood, she said, sinking back into the plastic chair. Some kind of poisoning from something botanical. But Elena, we don't have any unusual plants in our apartment. We barely have houseplants. I don't understand how this could have happened. I wanted to ask about the vodka directly, but something held me back. If Sarah had sent me poisoned alcohol, and if she was now pretending not to know how Marcus had been exposed to toxins, then confronting her directly could be dangerous. Instead, I asked a different question. Sarah, what did you and Marcus do this evening before dinner? We didn't do anything special. Marcus came home from running some errands. I made chicken and rice. We ate dinner and watched Netflix, everything completely normal until he started feeling sick. What kind of errands? Sarah's pause was so brief I almost missed it. I don't know. Just regular weekend stuff. But I caught the hesitation, and I filed it away with all the other small inconsistencies that were adding up to a terrible picture. I stayed at the hospital until midnight, when the nurses finally convinced Sarah to go home and get some sleep. Marcus was stable but still critical, and the doctors wanted to continue monitoring him closely. As I drove home through empty streets, I couldn't stop thinking about that bottle of vodka and Marcus's warning to keep it as evidence of what he had asked. Now I was afraid I knew the answer. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's pale face against the hospital pillow and heard the steady beeping of the machines keeping him alive. By 5 a.m, I gave up pretending and made coffee in the dark kitchen. The house felt different somehow. Like the shadows were hiding secrets I didn't want to discover. I kept thinking about Sarah's lie, about the wine Marcus supposedly drank despite his sulfite allergy. If she was lying about that, what else was she lying about? I called the hospital at 6. Marcus was stable but still critical. The doctors were continuing to monitor his condition, but there had been no significant change overnight. At 7, Emma found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee and scrolling through medical websites on my laptop. Mom, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all? Not really, sweetheart. She poured herself a glass of orange juice and sat across from me. Is Marcus going to be okay? I hope so. The doctors think he was poisoned by some kind of plant toxin. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the kind of seriousness that reminded me she was almost an adult. That's really specific, she said finally. Like, how do you accidentally get poisoned by plants? That was exactly the question that had been keeping me awake. You don't. Usually, unless someone gives them to you. Emma's eyes widened as she understood what I was implying. You think someone poisoned Marcus on purpose? I think it's possible. Who would do that, and why? I couldn't bring myself to voice my suspicions about Sarah. Not to Emma. Not yet. But the question had been eating at me all night, along with the terrible guilt that I might have been the one to deliver the poison. I don't know, honey, but Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded, suddenly looking younger than her 17 years. You've been following Aunt Sarah's social media. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Anything that might seem concerning? Emma bit her lip, a gesture she'd inherited from me when she was thinking carefully about her words. Actually, yeah. She's been posting weird stuff about karma and people getting what they deserve, and she's been deleting posts, which is strange for an influencer. They usually leave everything up for engagement. What kind of posts has she been deleting? I screenshot some of them because they seemed off. Want me to show you? Yes. Please? Emma ran upstairs and returned with her phone, scrolling through her camera roll until she found what she was looking for. Look at this one from 2 weeks ago. The screenshot showed a photo of Sarah's hands wrapped around a coffee mug, with a caption that made my blood run cold. Some people think they can take everything and never pay the price, but the universe keeps score, and payment always comes due. And this one from last week, Emma continued, swiping to another screenshot. The photo was a close-up of Sarah's face, looking directly at the camera with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold and calculating. The caption read, "Family is supposed to mean loyalty, but when family betrays you, loyalty becomes a weapon." I stared at the images, feeling sick. These weren't the usual lifestyle posts that Sarah shared. These felt personal. Targeted. Emma, I need you to save all of these screenshots and send them to my phone. Every single one you have. Already did, she said quietly. Mom, I think Aunt Sarah is talking about you in these posts. I think so too. After Emma left for school, I spent the morning researching plant toxins that could cause the symptoms Marcus was experiencing. What I found made my hands shake as I typed. White snakeroot was a plant native to the eastern United States that contained a compound called trematol. When consumed, it caused what 19th century doctors had called milk sickness. The symptoms included muscle weakness, cardiac depression, neurological problems, and in severe cases, death. The symptoms matched exactly what Dr. Torres had described. More disturbing was what I learned about how the toxin could be extracted and concentrated. With the right knowledge and equipment, someone could create a tincture or extract that would be virtually undetectable when mixed with alcohol. Someone like Sarah, who had been researching herbal remedies and natural medicine for her blog. My phone rang, interrupting my research. It was Jessica. Elena. I'm at the hospital with Marcus. The doctors have identified the specific toxin in his system. It's something called trematol, from white snakeroot. They want to know if he could have been exposed to this plant recently. I felt the room spin around me. They're sure, positive. They're asking Sarah about everywhere Marcus has been in the past few days, everything he's eaten or drunk. But Elena, this is a very specific type of poisoning. It's not something that happens by accident. I know. Jessica, I need to tell you something. But I need you to promise me you won't say anything to Sarah until I figure out what to do. What is it? Sarah sent me a bottle of vodka for my birthday. I gave it to Marcus yesterday when he came to fix my fence. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Jessica, are you there? I'm here. Elena, where's that bottle now? Marcus took it home to surprise Sarah with it. I told him it was a peace offering from me. Oh, God. Elena, you need to call the police. Right now. I can't accuse my own sister of attempted murder without more proof than suspicions and social media posts. Then get proof. But Elena, if Sarah sent you poisoned vodka and you gave it to Marcus, that means she was trying to kill you. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been thinking the same thing all morning. I have to go, I told Jessica. I need to think about this. Elena, don't do anything dangerous. If you're right about Sarah, she's already tried to kill one person. Don't give her a reason to try again. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process what I'd learned. White snakeroot, a plant that Sarah could have researched, obtained, and processed into a deadly extract, a plant whose toxin had nearly killed Marcus. Marcus, who should have been me? I pulled up Sarah's Instagram again and started scrolling backward through weeks of posts, looking for clues I might have missed. What I found made my stomach churn. 3 weeks ago, a photo of a nature walk with the caption, "Learning about the healing power of native plants. So much wisdom in what grows wild." A month ago, a post about natural remedies with the hashtag traditional medicine. 2 months ago, a photo of books about herbal extraction methods. The evidence was circumstantial, but it painted a picture of someone who had been planning something for months. Someone who had the knowledge and the motive to poison the vodka she'd sent me. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. How is Marcus doing this morning? I'm so worried. The doctors still don't know what caused this. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. He's stable. The doctors are running more tests. Her reply came immediately. Thank God. I don't know what I'd do if I lost him. Reading those words, knowing what I now suspected, made me feel physically ill. Sarah was either the most concerned wife in the world, or she was a sociopath capable of poisoning her own husband and then playing the devastated victim. I was starting to believe it was the latter. But I needed more than social media posts and circumstantial evidence. I needed proof that would convince the police. Proof that would stand up in court. And I was going to have to be very, very careful about how I got it. Emma came home from school that afternoon with the focused intensity she usually reserved for major projects. She dropped her backpack by the front door and found me in the kitchen, where I'd been pacing and drinking too much coffee since my conversation with Jessica. Mom, we need to talk. I've been thinking about this all day. And I want to help you investigate Aunt Sarah. Emma, I can't ask you to get involved in this. It could be dangerous. You're not asking. I'm offering. And Mom, you need my help. I know way more about social media forensics than you do. And I've already been tracking Aunt Sarah's online activity for months. That stopped me short. For months, ever since Christmas when she had that meltdown here, something about her felt off to me. So I started paying attention to what she posted. I've been screenshots weird stuff, and I think some of it might be important now. Show me? Emma sat at the kitchen table and opened her laptop. pulling up a folder labeled Aunt Sarah screenshots that contained dozens of images. "Look at this progression," she said, arranging the screenshots in chronological order. 3 months ago, her posts were normal lifestyle stuff. Then they started getting weird. The first screenshot showed Sarah's typical content, a perfectly arranged breakfast bowl with inspirational quotes about living your best life. But then Emma showed me posts from 2 months ago that were noticeably different. The photos were darker, the captions more bitter. Posts about people who had everything handed to them. Posts about unfairness and karma and settling scores. "And look at this," Emma continued, pulling up Sarah's Pinterest account. She's been creating secret boards about herbal medicine, plant extraction, and something called traditional toxicology. I felt my blood pressure spike as Emma showed me board after board of information about poisonous plants, extraction methods, and historical cases of plant-based murders. "Emma, how did you find these?" Sarah's Pinterest boards are private. I may have created a fake account and requested to follow her. She accepted because she thought I was another lifestyle blogger. That was dangerously close to stalking. But I couldn't deny that Emma had uncovered crucial evidence. "There's more," Emma said. "I found her Google search history." "How did you find her search history?" "She uses the same password for everything. And she once logged into Google on my laptop when she was here for Christmas. Her account was still cached." Emma pulled up a document that made my hands shake as I read it. Sarah had been researching white snakeroot for months. Searches for undetectable plant poisons, alcohol extraction methods, symptoms of trematol poisoning, and most damning of all, how much white snakeroot is lethal. The searches went back 6 months, long before she'd sent me the vodka. This wasn't impulsive, this was premeditated, but the most chilling discovery was a series of searches about my personal life, my work schedule, the kids' school activity, my medication routine, even the layout of my house, which she'd researched using real estate websites. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "she's been planning to hurt you for a long time." I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of Sarah's deception. The sister I'd grown up with, the woman I'd shared a childhood bedroom with, had spent months researching how to kill me. "There's something else," Emma said. "I found encrypted messages." "What kind of messages?" "She's been using an app called Signal to communicate with someone about what she calls the Elena problem. The messages are mostly coded, but there's enough context to understand what they're discussing." Emma showed me screenshots of conversation threads that made my skin crawl. Messages about perfect timing and birthday surprises and making sure it looks accidental. The other person in the conversation was listed only as helper, but from context, it seemed to be someone providing Sarah with information about plant toxins and extraction methods. One message thread from 3 weeks ago made me feel physically sick. "Sarah, the target can't drink alcohol because of medication. Will that affect the absorption rate?" "Helper actually makes it better. System will be more sensitive. Half the usual amount should be sufficient." "Sarah, and if someone else drinks it instead?" "Helper depends on their size and health. Probably not lethal, but definitely serious." The timestamp on that last exchange was 2 days before Marcus had collapsed. Emma was watching my face as I processed what I was reading. "Mom, we have to call the police. This is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder." "I know, but Emma, once we do this, there's no going back. Sarah will be arrested. Our family will be destroyed. And she'll know that we're the ones who turned her in. She tried to kill you, Mom. And she almost killed Marcus. We can't just pretend this isn't happening." Emma was right, and I knew it. But the thought of destroying my sister, even a sister who wanted me dead, felt like tearing out a piece of my own heart. "There's one more thing," Emma said softly. "I think she's planning something else." "What do you mean?" "Her most recent searches were about you, Mom. Your work schedule. Your routines. When you drop me and Dylan off at school? She's still gathering information about your daily life." The implication was clear. The poisoned vodka had failed to kill me because I'd given it to Marcus instead of drinking it myself. But that didn't mean Sarah was done trying. "She knows the vodka didn't work the way she planned," Emma continued. "And she knows Marcus might recover and remember what happened. She's probably planning her next moves." I looked at my 17-year-old daughter, amazed by her maturity and terrified by the situation we'd found ourselves in. "Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. We're going to call the police and turn over all of this evidence. But until Sarah is in custody, I want you and Dylan to stay with your father." "Mom, I'm not leaving you alone." "Yes, you are. Because if something happens to me, I need to know that you two are safe." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Okay, but Mom, promise me you'll be careful." Aunt Sarah isn't the person we thought she was. As I gathered up all the screenshots and evidence Emma had collected, I couldn't help but think about the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who'd come to me for advice about boys and college applications. That person was gone, replaced by someone capable of methodically planning my murder. The Sarah I'd loved was already dead. Now I had to make sure she didn't take anyone else with her. Tuesday morning found me sitting in the parking lot of the Morris County Police Department, staring at the glass doors and trying to work up the courage to walk through them. I'd printed out all of Emma's screenshots, organized the evidence chronologically, and written a detailed timeline of events. Everything was in a manila folder on the passenger seat, waiting to destroy my sister's life. I'd barely slept again, and when I did manage to doze off, I dreamed of Sarah as a little girl, crying after she'd fallen off her bike and scraped her knee. In the dream, I was putting a Band-Aid on her wound and telling her everything would be okay. Now I was about to make sure nothing would ever be okay for her again. The police station was busier than I'd expected for 10 in the morning. Uniformed officers moved purposefully through the lobby, and civilians sat in plastic chairs filling out paperwork or waiting to speak with detectives. The desk sergeant, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, directed me to a small office down a narrow hallway. Detective Maria Rivera was younger than I'd anticipated, probably in her late 30s, with sharp brown eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. She offered me coffee, which I accepted gratefully, and gestured for me to sit in a chair across from her desk. "Mrs. Dalton, I understand you have information about a possible poisoning case." The words tumbled out of me in a rush. I told her about the vodka, about Sarah's lies at the hospital, about Emma's digital investigation. Detective Rivera listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, studying the screenshots and printed documents I'd spread across her desk. "This is substantial," she said finally. "The digital evidence alone suggests premeditation, and the timing correlates with Mr. Chen's hospitalization. But Miss Dalton, I need to ask you something difficult. Are you prepared for what happens next?" "What do you mean? If we move forward with this investigation, your sister will likely be arrested and charged with attempted murder. Your family relationships will be permanently damaged. There will be media attention, court proceeding, and a lot of scrutiny of your personal lives. Are you ready for all of that?" I thought about Marcus lying unconscious in the hospital, about Emma's fear that Sarah was planning something else, about the months of research into my daily routines. "Detective Rivera, if I don't do this, I think Sarah will try again, and next time, she might succeed." That's what I needed to hear. "Let's talk about what happens next." Detective Rivera explained the process. They would need to verify the digital evidence Emma had collected, obtain search warrants for Sarah's apartment and electronic devices, and coordinate with the hospital to preserve all medical evidence from Marcus's case. The legal process would take time. Search warrants required judicial approval, which could take several days. In the meantime, I needed to act normally, avoid confronting Sarah directly, and document any further contact she attempted. "One more thing," Detective Rivera said as I prepared to leave. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay while we conduct this investigation? If your sister realizes what we're doing, she might escalate her behavior. I'm sending my kids to stay with their father. I'll be okay at home." Detective Rivera handed me her business card. "Call me immediately if anything feels wrong. Don't worry about seeming paranoid. Trust your instinct." Driving home, I felt both relief and terror. The machinery of justice was now in motion, but I still had to get through the next few days without arousing Sarah's suspicion. I picked up Emma and Dylan from school early, citing a family emergency that wasn't technically a lie. We stopped by their father's apartment in Morristown, where I explained the situation as carefully as I could. Michael, my ex-husband, listened with growing alarm. "Elena, are you seriously telling me that Sarah tried to poison you?" "That's what the evidence suggests." Michael had never particularly liked Sarah, finding her dramatic and self-centered, but he seemed genuinely shocked by the scope of what she'd allegedly done. "The kids can stay here as long as necessary," he said. "But Elena, you shouldn't be alone in that house. What if she comes looking for you?" "The police are handling it. I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. That evening, alone in my house for the first time in years, every sound seemed amplified. The creaking of the wooden floors, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic on Route 22. I checked and rechecked the locks on all the doors and windows, something I'd never felt the need to do in this safe suburban neighborhood. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the caller ID, and my heart rate spiked. "Elena, How are you holding up? I know you're worried about Marcus too. Her voice sounded normal, concerned, like the sister I remembered from before everything went wrong. I'm okay. How is Marcus today? A little better. The doctors think he's out of immediate danger, but they still don't know what caused the poisoning. It's so frustrating not having answers. I gripped the phone tighter, marveling at her ability to sound genuinely distressed while discussing the crime she'd committed. I'm sure they'll figure it out soon. I hope so. Elena. I keep thinking about how strange it is that this happened right after we started talking again, after I sent you that birthday gift. It's like the universe doesn't want our family to heal. The universe. As if some cosmic force were responsible for the white snakeroot that had nearly killed her husband. These things happen, I managed to say. I was thinking, maybe when Marcus gets out of the hospital, we could all have dinner together. You and the kids, me and Marcus, really try to rebuild our relationship. The invitation made my skin crawl. Sarah was planning family dinners while potentially planning my murder. That sounds nice. Let's see how Marcus recovers first. Of course. Elena. I'm really glad we're talking again. I've missed you so much. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen shaking. The Sarah on the phone had sounded completely sincere, genuinely emotional about repairing our relationship. If I hadn't seen the evidence Emma had collected, I might have believed her. But I had seen the evidence, the months of research, the plant extraction methods, the searches about my daily routine. The concerned sister on the phone was the same person who had methodically planned my death. I poured myself a glass of water and noticed my hands were trembling. 3 more days until the search warrant could be executed. 3 more days of pretending I didn't know what Sarah had done. 3 more days of watching my back and sleeping with one eye open. Thursday morning brought a call from Detective Rivera that made my hands shake as I answered. Miss Dalton, we executed the search warrant at your sister's apartment an hour ago. You need to know what we found? I was sitting in my car outside TechFlow Solutions, having arrived early for work in an attempt to maintain some normalcy in my routine. What did you find? Evidence that corroborates everything you suspected. Your sister had a sophisticated setup for extracting plant alkaloids, including white snakeroot. We found dried plant materials, extraction equipment, and detailed notes about dosage calculations. My stomach clenched. So it's true. She really tried to kill me. There's more. We found a journal with your name, your work address, your children's school schedules, and calculations about lethal dosages based on your approximate weight and medical conditions. Mrs. Dalton, your sister had been planning this for at least 6 months. 6 months. While I'd been going about my daily life, working, raising my kids, worrying about normal things like soccer schedules and college applications, Sarah had been researching how to murder me. We also found communications with someone she refers to as her consultant. Digital forensics is working to identify this person. But it appears your sister was getting expert advice about plant toxins and extraction methods. A consultant. Sarah hadn't just decided to poison me on impulse. She'd hired help. Detective Rivera. When will you arrest her? We're coordinating with the hospital and the district attorney's office. Probably tomorrow morning. But Mrs. Dalton, I need to warn you about something else we discovered. My heart rate spiked. What? Your sister has been conducting surveillance on your house. We found photographs of your daily routines, notes about when you leave for work, when your children get home from school. She knows your schedule better than you might realize. The implication hit me immediately. Sarah wasn't just planning one murder attempt. She was gathering intelligence for multiple scenarios. There's something else. The journal entries suggest she's frustrated that her first attempt failed. There are recent notes about alternative methods and timing. Alternative methods. I felt sick. Detective Rivera, I think she called me Tuesday night to gauge my suspicions. She was testing whether I knew anything about the poisoning. That's consistent with what we're seeing in her communications. Mrs. Dalton, I strongly advise you to vary your routine until we have her in custody. Don't go to work at the same time. Don't take the same route home. And consider staying somewhere else tonight. I can't hide from my own sister indefinitely. It's not indefinitely. It's until tomorrow morning. After I hung up, I sat in the parking lot trying to process what I'd learned. The scope of Sarah's planning was overwhelming. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of poor judgment. This was a calculated, methodical attempt to commit the perfect murder. And I was the intended victim. I went through the motions at work, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. Samantha Brooks noticed my distraction and pulled me aside around lunchtime. Elena, You look terrible. What's going on? I gave her a heavily edited version of the situation, explaining that there were ongoing family issues that might require my attention over the next few days. Take whatever time you need, she said. Family comes first. If only it were that simple. I left work early and drove home via a circuitous route, checking my rearview mirror constantly for signs I was being followed. The house felt different when I entered, though nothing had been disturbed. It was the knowledge that Sarah had been watching, photographing, documenting my life that made every familiar space feel violated. I called Emma to check in, reaching her at Michael's apartment where she and Dylan were staying. How are you holding up? Mom. I'm okay, sweetheart. How are you and Dylan? Dylan's confused, but okay. I told him it was just temporary, that we'd be home soon. Mom, when will Aunt Sarah be arrested? Tomorrow morning. Probably. Are you scared? The honest answer was yes. I was terrified. But I couldn't tell my 17-year-old daughter that her aunt had been planning to murder her mother for months. I'm being careful. Honey, the police are handling everything. After dinner, I double-checked all the locks and closed all the curtains. I'd never been afraid in my own house before, but knowing that Sarah had been watching, documenting, planning, made every shadow seem threatening. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. Thinking about you tonight? Hope you're not feeling too lonely in that big house by yourself. I stared at the message, feeling cold. How did she know I was alone? Had she been watching the house? Noticed that the kids weren't home. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Detective Rivera with a brief note. She knows I'm alone tonight. The response came back quickly. Do not engage. We're moving up the timeline. Arrest will happen first thing in the morning. I turned off all the lights and went upstairs. But I didn't undress for bed. Instead, I sat in the chair by my bedroom window, looking out at the street and waiting for morning to come. At 11:30, a car drove slowly past my house, slowing down as it approached my driveway before continuing down the street. I couldn't make out the driver in the darkness, but the timing felt wrong for casual neighborhood traffic. At 12:15, the same car made another pass. I called Detective Rivera. Mrs. Dalton, pack a bag and go to a hotel for the night. Right now, Detective Rivera. I think she's outside my house. We're sending a patrol car to your location immediately. But don't wait for them. Leave now. I threw some clothes into an overnight bag and headed for the garage, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the car again. Parked now at the end of my street with its lights off, I drove to a Hampton Inn 20 minutes away, paid cash for a room, and called Detective Rivera to give her my location. Smart move, she said. Try to get some sleep. We'll have your sister in custody by noon tomorrow. But sleep didn't come. I lay on top of the hotel bedspread, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the little girl who used to be afraid of thunderstorms. By morning, that little girl would be in jail, charged with attempted murder, and I would finally be safe. Detective Rivera called me at 7:30 Friday morning while I was drinking terrible hotel coffee and staring out the window at the parking lot. Mrs. Dalton, we're moving in to arrest your sister in 30 minutes. She's at Overlook Medical Center visiting her husband. Something about arresting Sarah at Marcus's bedside felt particularly cruel, but I understood the logic. She would be in a public place, surrounded by witnesses, less likely to cause a scene or try to run. Do you want me there? That's up to you. But if you do come, stay in the waiting area. Don't try to speak with her or interfere with the arrest in any way. I'll be there. I drove to the hospital in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. After months of planning my murder, after nearly killing Marcus, after stalking my house and terrorizing my family, Sarah was finally going to face consequences for her actions. But she was also still my little sister, and I was about to watch her life end. The cardiac unit waiting area was nearly empty when I arrived. I chose a chair that gave me a view of the hallway leading to Marcus's room and tried to prepare myself for what I was about to witness. At 8:15, I saw Detective Rivera and 2 uniformed officers walking down the hallway with purposeful strides. My heart rate spiked, and I found myself holding my breath. The arrest happened quickly. Through the open door of Marcus's room, I could see Sarah sitting beside his bed, holding his hand and speaking quietly to it. She looked up when the officers entered, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and then something I'd never seen before, cold calculation. Sarah Chen. You're under arrest for the attempted murder of Marcus Chen and Elena Dalton. Detective Rivera's voice was clear and professional, but Sarah's response was anything but. This is insane. I haven't done anything wrong. Marcus is my husband. I would never hurt him. But even as she protested, I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how much they knew and what her options were. The handcuffs clicked into place, and Sarah's facade finally cracked. This is Elena's fault. She was staring directly at me through the doorway now, her face twisted with a rage I'd never seen before. She took everything from me. Our parents' love, the house, the perfect life. I was just evening the score. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it. But Sarah was beyond listening to Miranda rights or legal advice. 27 years of resentment came pouring out in a torrent of accusations and admissions. Do you know what it's like to live in someone's shadow your entire life? To watch your sister get everything handed to her while you struggle for scraps. She was supposed to drink that vodka. It was supposed to be her in the hospital. Not Marcus. The confession was being recorded on multiple devices. Every word Sarah spoke was sealing her fate. But she seemed unable to stop herself. I spent months planning this, months researching the perfect way to make her pay, and she ruined it by giving the vodka to someone else. She always ruins everything. One of the uniformed officers was trying to guide Sarah toward the door, but she planted her feet and continued her tirade. Elena always was the smart one, the responsible one, the one everyone loved. But she's also selfish and manipulative, and she deserves everything that's coming to her. Sarah, I said, stepping into the doorway. I couldn't stay silent any longer. She whipped her head around to face me, and for a moment I saw something that looked almost like relief in her eyes. Elena, tell them how you stole my inheritance. Tell them how you turned our parents against me. I didn't steal anything. Sarah, Mom and Dad left us both what they thought we needed. What I needed a family that didn't treat me like a disappointment. I needed parents who loved me as much as they loved their perfect daughter. The pain in her voice was real, even mixed with the rage and the justifications. Sarah had been hurting for years, feeling overlooked and undervalued, but that pain didn't excuse what she'd done. Sarah, I'm sorry you felt that way, but trying to kill me wasn't going to fix anything. She laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the hospital walls. Kill you! Elena, I was saving everyone from having to deal with your judgment and your superiority for the rest of our lives. The world would have been better off without you in it. The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about inheritance or jealousy. Sarah genuinely believed I didn't deserve to exist. Ma'am, we need to go now, Detective Rivera said firmly. As they led Sarah away, she turned back to look at me one more time. This isn't over, Elena. Even from prison, I'll find a way to make you pay. The threat hung in the air long after she'd been escorted out of sight. I went into Marcus's room, where he was awake and staring at the ceiling with a stunned expression. Did you hear all of that? I asked. He nodded slowly. I heard enough. Elena, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was capable of something like this. Neither did I. Marcus tried to sit up straighter in the hospital bed. She really tried to kill you. And she almost killed me instead. I'm sorry. Marcus, I'm sorry I gave you that vodka. I'm sorry I put you in danger. Elena, you saved my life by giving me that vodka instead of drinking it yourself. If you'd consumed it, with your smaller body weight and your medication interactions, you'd probably be dead. The thought made me dizzy. Sarah's plan had been more sophisticated than I'd realized. She'd calculated the dosage specifically for me, taking into account my medical conditions and body weight. Marcus, being larger and healthier, had survived what might have killed me. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now she goes to trial, and hopefully, she gets the help she needs. But even as I said the word, I wondered if help was possible for someone who had spent months planning to murder her own sister. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. I left the hospital feeling emotionally drained, but finally safe. For the first time in weeks, I didn't check my rearview mirror constantly or worry about who might be watching my house. Sarah was in custody, and the nightmare was over. Or so I thought. 3 hours later, Detective Rivera called with news that made my blood run cold. Missy Dalton, your sister posted bail. She's been released pending trial. How is that possible? She confessed to attempted murder. Her lawyer argued that she's not a flight risk, that she has ties to the community, and that her confession was made under emotional duress. The judge set bail at $200,000. Someone posted it for her. Someone posted $200,000 to get Sarah out of jail. Someone wanted her free, wanted her back on the street where she could finish what she'd started. Mrs. Dalton, you need to take precautions. We've requested a restraining order, but it won't be processed until Monday. Until then, you're not legally protected. I sat in my car outside the police station, trying to process what I'd just learned. Sarah was free. The woman who had confessed to planning my murder, who had threatened me even as she was being arrested, was somewhere out there with the resources and the motivation to try again, and I had no idea who was helping her. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and every day felt like reliving the nightmare. I sat in the courtroom gallery, watching my sister's defense attorney try to paint her as a mentally ill woman who needed treatment. Not punishment, but the evidence was overwhelming. Rachel Kim, the digital forensics expert, testified about the months of premeditation revealed in Sarah's search history and encrypted messages. Dr. Torres explained the medical evidence, how the white snakeroot had nearly killed Marcus and would have been lethal to someone with my smaller body weight and medication interactions. Emma took the stand to explain how she'd discovered Sarah's social media surveillance and threatening posts. My 17-year-old daughter spoke with a composure that amazed me, methodically walking the jury through screenshots and timeline evidence that sealed Sarah's fate. Marcus testified from a wheelchair, still recovering from the nerve damage the poison had caused. He described the vodka I'd given him, the evening he'd decided to surprise Sarah with what he thought was a peace offering from me, and waking up 3 days later in intensive care. When it was Sarah's turn to testify in her own defense, I barely recognized the woman who took the stand. Gone was the polished lifestyle influencer with perfect makeup and staged photos. In her place sat a thin, hollow-eyed woman who seemed to have aged years in the months since her arrest. Her attorney tried to establish that she'd been suffering from depression and anxiety, that her actions weren't premeditated, but rather the result of a mental health crisis. But when the prosecutor cross-examined her, Sarah's composure cracked again. You researched white snakeroot extraction for 6 months before sending the vodka to your sister, didn't you, Ms. Chen? I was exploring herbal medicine for my blog. You searched for information about your sister's daily routine, her work schedule, her children's activities, didn't you? I was trying to understand her life better. You calculated lethal dosages based on her body weight and medical conditions, didn't you? Sarah's pause lasted too long. I was trying to understand the effects of different compounds. The prosecutor pulled out printed screenshots of Sarah's Pinterest boards, her Google searches, her encrypted messages with her botanical consultant. Miss Chen, did you or did not plan to murder your sister Elena Dalton by sending her poisoned vodka for her birthday? Another long pause. The courtroom was completely silent. She took everything from me, Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. My whole life, everything I ever wanted, she got instead. I just wanted her to know what it felt like to lose something important. That wasn't the question. Miss Chen, did you plan to murder your sister? Yes. The word hung in the courtroom like a death sentence of its own. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder of Marcus Chen. Attempted murder of Elena Dalton. Conspiracy. And assault with a deadly weapon. At sentencing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I'd written pages of notes, but when I stood at the podium and looked at Sarah sitting at the defendant's table, most of what I'd planned to say evaporated. Your Honor, I began. My voice shakier than I'd expected. Sarah is my sister. We shared a bedroom growing up. She taught me how to braid friendship bracelets, and I helped her with her homework. I loved her. Sarah was crying silently, her shoulders shaking, but the woman who planned to murder me, who nearly killed her own husband, who stalked my children and terrorized my family, that woman isn't the sister I remember. I don't know what happened to the little girl who used to be afraid of thunderstorms, but I hope someday she finds her way back. The judge sentenced Sarah to 18 months in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She would be required to undergo psychological evaluation and treatment, pay full restitution for Marcus's medical expenses, and maintain a permanent restraining order keeping her away from my family. As the bailiff led her away, Sarah turned to look at me one last time. Her eyes were different now, emptied of the rage that had consumed her. She looked lost, like a child who'd wandered too far from home and couldn't find her way back. 6 months later, Marcus had made a full recovery and was back to work. The nerve damage had healed, leaving only faint scars on his hands as evidence of what he'd survived. He and I had developed an unlikely friendship through the shared trauma, bonding over our mutual experience of surviving Sarah's betrayal. Emma had started college at Rutgers, majoring in criminal justice with a focus on digital forensics. The experience with Sarah had awakened something in her, a desire to help other families navigate the intersection of technology and crime. Dylan, now 15, was in therapy processing what had happened to our family. He still asked about Sarah sometime, wondering if she would ever be the aunt he remembered from when he was younger. I never knew how to answer those questions. I was in therapy too, working through the complex grief of losing a sister who was still alive but would never be part of our lives again. Some days I missed the Sarah from our childhood so intensely it felt like physical pain. Other days I was simply grateful to be alive. On a warm Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after Sarah had sent me the poisoned vodka, I held a small gathering in my backyard. Marcus was there with Jessica, who had become one of my closest friends. Emma was home from college for the weekend. Dylan had invited his best friend over. Michael, my ex-husband, stopped by with his new wife, offering the kind of co-parenting support I'd never expected but deeply appreciated. We grilled burgers and played cornhole and talked about normal things like upcoming movies and football scores and Dylan's debate tournament. As the sun set and we gathered around the fire pit I'd installed in the spring, someone suggested making s'mores. Jessica handed me a bottle of sparkling apple cider. "For a toast," she said, "to survive the unthinkable and find family in unexpected places." I looked around the circle at the people who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. Not all of them were related to me by blood, but they were family in the truest sense of the word. "To the chosen family," I said, raising my glass, "and to second chances." As we touched glasses and the fire crackled between us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Peace. The sister I'd loved was gone, but the life I'd built with people who truly cared about me was stronger than ever. Sometimes the family you create is more powerful than the family you're born into, and sometimes surviving means learning the difference between the two. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with difficult family relationships in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own safety? How did you navigate setting boundaries with toxic relatives? Please like this video if you believe that sometimes loving someone means protecting yourself from them, and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming family trauma and finding strength in unexpected places. Your support means everything to me. And remember, you're never alone in dealing with these complicated family dynamics. What would you have done in my situation?